Everybody knows that Jeff Welton and Jeff Wilson, JW squared, are the Nautel sales guys that pop up every month here. And we appreciate that because they allow us to get a good view into what's going on. And today's topic, I think, is a real good one. And that has to do with understanding what's going on before you actually buy. And Mary's good on that too. I've had Mary tell people that one particular item isn't what they need. They really need something else. And she saved the money. And so that's good. So as we get started here, Jeff, uh, one of you guys, let's talk about this. When you're going to order a transmitter, yes, antenna, yes, even audio processors or consoles, what do you have to do first?
The biggest thing, and I'll lead on this because I'll throw in the caveat that I've got another meeting double booked, and I am going to, as soon as I get a flag on my other screen saying so and so is joined, I'm going to bail and dump it all in Wilson's lap, so he'll get to talk a lot then for about 10 or 15 minutes or however long they keep me. But the biggest thing I think is letting whoever you're working with, and it doesn't have to be us or Mary, or it could be the folks at SCMS or Gates Air, God forbid, whatever company. But let them know what you're trying to accomplish. Don't just start with I need a transmitter. I mean, it's like let them know, if you're looking at HD, if you're not looking at HD, if you think you'd like to leave the door open down the road, or if you don't ever want to see an HD transmitter ever, for God, ever, ever, ever. Um, with audio, are you looking at digital audio? Are you looking at handling a simultaneous stream? Are you looking at HD subcarriers and different channels? So I think that is the biggest thing. And here's what I tell people. If you call me and say, I want a transmitter, and I send you a quote just for a transmitter and haven't asked a single question, then I'm not doing my job. And, you should be querying me on that then. So now, having said that, I'll get like an LPFM ping and say, I need a transmitter and we're on a budget. It's got to be the cheapest thing possible. Well, in that case, you're going to get quoted the cheapest thing possible, right? Rightly or wrongly.
You're not going to send them to China, are you?
No, no.
Okay, good.
The guy sent me a picture of one of our Nug shirts, not this particular one, but the one from I think 4 or 5 years ago, and it had a big hole in the underarm. And he goes, "If only your T-shirts lasted as long as your transmitters." And I went back and said, "Well, our transmitters aren't made in China." Uh,
Ooh. Well, listen, I'll give you this. Maybe this will spark something.
and I don't know where our T-shirts are made, by the way.
I walked into the GM's office of a radio station one day, and he was on the phone with a salesman, not Jeff, but someone else, and actually a decent fellow. And what I heard and what they were doing was upgrading from a 10 kilowatt to a 27 and a half kilowatt transmitter. I walked in, and just as I walked in, he's saying, all right, then. So when the transmitter gets here, we just plug it in and go.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, I
kind of
like
fell
that.
on the floor, you know? And I, I, this was my first full-time 40-hour a week chief engineer job. And I was only a few months into it. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, there's only about 24 things we have to consider before we get that transmitter in here. And one of them had to do with the power. You have to make sure you have the right power entrance. You're going to have a second transmitter. You want a coax switcher, don't you?
I'll give you two examples there too, because so I get a lot of calls from GMs that I need a new transmitter. Cool. What do you need? Well, we're just a Class A. I need a 6 kilowatt. And it's like, no, 6 kilowatts your radiated power. What's your transmitter power? Could be anywhere between 1 kilowatt and 10 kilowatts as far as that goes. So that's the kind of thing. Had a lot of calls where a GM will order equipment, and then I'll get a call from an engineer about a month later saying, "Hey, we got, I'm told we got a new transmitter coming. I didn't know anything about it." And it's like, yeah, you should have been part of that process from day one. So, we've had, I don't know how many times a transmitter will arrive and then be in storage for a month or 2 months or 3 months because either there wasn't a building to put it in because that was part of the project that the owner had never thought about, or because the engineer wasn't aware and was doing other things. So, yeah, it very much is a team effort. And as a rule, I will tend to, if I get an owner or an engineer or a manager calling, I will tend to say, hey, who's your engineer? And make sure they're in the loop early on.
Good point. Both the local engineer and the consulting engineer. And now about this power, Class A, 6 kilowatts. Are you going to talk about the antenna, or are you going to send someone like Mary to talk to them about the antenna?
It will depend. Like for me, and I mean Wilson may handle it different than I do, but I've got a power calculator. So if you give me your bay count, the number of lines, and your non-directional, I can reverse engineer and figure out what the TPO needs to be. And then if we figure out HD from there, I can add the necessary power headroom for that. If you're looking at a CP and there's no antenna on the license, then I'm going to punt. I'm going to either dump it to Mary. And if you're looking for any third party gear, line, antennas, any of that stuff, absolutely going to hand it off to a reseller, somebody that works projects, because I sell transmitters. I don't get paid enough to sell all the third party stuff.
Plus, you really don't know every city, every market to
Now,
know the height of where it's going to be, and you wouldn't want to shoot over a city.
well, and I mean, we're not consulting engineers by any stretch. I don't pretend to be one. I don't play one on TV. So I can handle the simple stuff. Like I say, if I know you've got a 4 bay full wave and 150 feet of 3 1/8 air core line, I can figure out what size transmitter I need. But if you tell me you've got a construction permit for a Rorschach blot directional and you got no idea where it's going and how high and what do you need for a transmitter, my answer is going to be, I don't know. You need an engineer to figure that stuff out for you.
When we talk about a transmission system, if you are on a site with other stations, you're going to have filters. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to affect the power level.
Oh, there's all kinds. I mean, Dave, I see Dave Doherty over there, and he's there his heads up now. But he and I worked on a project in Minneapolis once where the customer wanted to, and I did sell the antenna for that one. And the customer wanted to save some money by picking the antenna up himself. And he drove down to Chandler, picked the antenna up, and I get a call from the ERI sales guy going, "Hey, he looked at the range test we were doing on his antenna, and he said that didn't look like his tower at all. Turned out instead of being a 3 foot guide tower, like all the documentation they'd sent in said, it was a 12 foot face open or self-supporting tower." And I think Dave knows exactly who I'm talking about. Uh,
Yeah, I sure
but
do. I remember it well. I
but
came into
yeah,
that kind of
so
late myself.
and so there was a huge panic as they had to change all the reflectors and model a completely different tower and mounting system.
That was an
So,
that was an impressive effort on ERI's part, I got to say, to make
oh
that
yeah,
work.
no, that
They were great.
their whole range crew earned some serious gold stars in my book that day.
They had
I
to
mean,
send a truck over to Home Depot to buy some more conduit to put in the aperture to make it match.
mhm, yep, yeah, it was just ugly. So I mean, that's just one example of where, even doing your best due diligence on learning all the information ahead of time, there'll occasionally be a surprise.
So
And
what kind of losses would someone see with a filter or several filters or uh, what's the one called an eater? Uh, I forgot the first word there, but uh, and then the level of coax because you have losses in coax.
mhm. Yeah,
So
so you got to factor out the length. I mean, air coax versus foam coax, the loss is slightly different. Every connector, every coupler, every elbow all adds, it's only a fraction of a dB. but if you get enough of them, it makes a difference. So there is a whole pile of stuff in there that needs to be, like I say, it needs to be factored in. And I've got rudimentary tools to do the basics, but I'm not going to invest a whole lot of time or effort. Like I'm not reverse engineering a directional antenna to figure out the game. That's way out of my skill set.
And you're probably recommending that a station pay a consulting engineer rather than trying to do it themselves.
Oh yeah. But I I've been telling the story. I had a guy call me recently about an LPFM that was down, and he wanted to know if he could just buy a new transmitter and just plug it in place of the old one. And I mean, ultimately, the problem turned to be the power was off at the transmitter site, so it wouldn't have, the new transmitter probably wouldn't have solved his problem at all. But actually, it certainly wouldn't have solved it at all. But yeah, no, there needs to be at the very least some level of engineering input. And I mean, that may be a full-blown consulting engineer if you're talking full site replacement. It may be a general contractor if you're talking building related stuff. It's going to vary depending on what you're doing, but you absolutely, you don't just, go out and this is not like shopping for a, I don't know, a toolkit for the back of the car.
I I'll go a little further on the station I mentioned earlier. Transmitter did show up, and first thing that we discovered, and I knew this, going to have to quadruple the electrical entrance. So GM hires a crew to come in at noon on a particular day. And the first thing they did was wire the hot to the neutral, blew up the panel, and both station was completely off the air.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lesson here about planning for your power entry. And a similar one. Now, this went from a 10, as I said, to a 27.5. And I said, you need to buy or trade or whatever a pair of 3.5 ton or so air conditioners. So he went out and traded a 7-ton. What do you suppose happened the first month? The 7-ton failed. And the transfer got very, very hot.
Mm-hmm.
And the tube in a 27.5 is not cheap.
Right.
But they don't like heat. So eventually they had to put a pair of units in.
Yeah. And I mean, another prime example, going back to the building analogy, I had one where a customer bought a transmitter, and we've been sitting on this transmitter for a year or two because they haven't had a building to put it in. And now they're at the point where they're like, okay, we think we got the building, but their CP expired. So now you've got to apply for a new construction permit. And the FCC tends to be a little cranky about granting replacement construction permits when you weren't able to get your ducks in a row in the first 3 years. So, I mean, our folks asked us what to do about it. And I said, if it was me, I would cancel the order and start from scratch, because the odds of them getting this construction permit are somewhere between slim and probably not a lot. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will get it, but I check it every couple of days and it's still sitting there in application pending.
All
So
right.
again, there are a lot of moving parts here, and you need to be sure that all the pieces are together.
Yeah, Barry. Also, even more fundamentally, you buy a transmitter, you have to make sure you understand how the truck is going to get to your transmitter site. And number two, excuse me, how you're getting the transmitter out of the truck and into the building, because sometimes the door on the building is not big
I
enough.
know. Yep. And I mean, that's one of those, when we take an order, there is a big, long questionnaire at the back of our configuration forms. And we've argued about getting rid of the config form because nobody else does it. but we don't get a lot of surprises at delivery time as a result. So yeah, one of the things there is what's the door size? Can it be removed if it needs to be? And I mean, yeah, you can't shove an 84-inch box into a 76-inch hole. Well, you can sideways, but sometimes that's not recommended.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen where the entire frame had to be dismantled in order to get the box through the door.
KGO, we put 250 kilowatts in there in 1991, and they had to their KGO's got the 3 tower off San Francisco Bay, and they the transmitters are upstairs in the building. So they had to blow the whole side out of the building and then crane the transmitters in through the side of the building.
My brother was a trucker. He often delivered transmitters for Comar, and he would take an 18-wheeler and find out that the only way up the mountain was too muddy, and they couldn't get it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, I've had a bunch where we'll drop a transmitter at the end of a driveway and skid steer the thing into the building because, yeah, and it'll be a track thing. So Wilson just posted in the chat the list of questions we ask about site conditions, and these are standard at order time for everything. And I mean, even with that, we'll still occasionally run into a surprise because somebody will be like, oh, no, the transmitter doesn't need to be uncrated, but the door's only, again, 76 inches tall for an 84-inch crate. Yeah, it kind of does.
So now we have a transmitter, we have an antenna, we have a coax switcher, we have a lot of coax, depending upon how tall the tower is, filter. What else do we need?
Yeah, and I mean, there could be all kinds of stuff like that. So, and I mean, you may or may not have filters. You may have branch combiners. You may have switch controllers, air handling, whether it's forced air, whether you've got ductwork to do, whether it's air conditioned or liquid cooled, where you putting your heat exchangers, who's running the plumbing. Some manufacturers will come in and do the install and do the plumbing for you. Other ones will send you a transmitter and you're doing your own. So yeah, very much you need to. And there's another thing. Are you scheduling any services like commissioning or installation services? Because different manufacturers will provide different levels of that. But like for us, as a rule, if you buy commissioning with a transmitter, support will reach out to coordinate the commissioning schedule with you. You're subject to their availability because we've got X number of guys. There's vacations, there's road trips. There may not be somebody available 2 weeks from now. It may be 3 months from now. So that all needs to be coordinated well in advance.
Ed, have you ever had to deliver a transmitter by helicopter? You're there in Washington, D.C., and it's pretty flat.
That would be in New York.
I know Cox in Atlanta had one delivered via helicopter when I was at Harris.
Yeah, well, we did one in New Orleans for I think might have been WWNO. I'm not 100% sure. But that was one where they took it up the freight elevator. They had 2 flights of stairs to the transmitter penthouse and discovered a concrete beam going across the stairwell that once you added the transmitter to the stair climber, the height clearance wasn't enough by about a foot. And they ended up bringing it back down the stairs and then winching it or putting it up with a sky crane. And shutting down Bourbon Street to do a helicopter lift into the top story of a 27-story building is not a nickel 95 process. That delivery went from a $3,000 truck delivery to a $30,000 helicopter delivery pretty fast. So again, that would have been something that it would have been a whole lot better if there had been a little bit of advance.
How often?
And
How often
There
do
you
you
go.
find this to be a problem, Jeff?
A couple times, probably once or twice a year worldwide.
Mhm.
I mean, it happens. It's not a frequent thing, but it's a frequent enough thing that it's good to know ahead of time.
Well,
Um,
freight elevator dimensions. That's another
mhm.
thing that you have to think about too,
Yep.
especially like in New York.
Yeah, Empire is quite a challenge. We changed out 20 kilowatt transmitters at Empire. First of all, you're going to have to hire the elevator mechanic. Second of all, it's going to have to be done after they shut down the observation deck for the night. On and on and on. There's a lot of unions involved in those facilities. So yeah, Empire was definitely a challenge. Fortunately, newer transmitters tend to be smaller than old transmitters. But the other thing I was going to point out to you, Barry, was if you're replacing a transmitter, you also have to consider if you're getting rid of the old transmitter, are you going to use the rigging company that is bringing in the new transmitter? Are you going to be ready at the same time? If it's a really old transmitter, you get into the old environmental issues of PCBs and labels, and how exactly are you going to get rid of that old transmitter? We did one for WCBS in New York, AM. The AM is out on its own island off of City Island. The bridge only has a 10-ton capacity on it, so there were any number of challenges on that. Again, all logistics, all stuff you have to figure out in advance. But besides, like I said, how's the truck going to get there? How are you getting the thing out of the truck? If you're getting rid of the old one, how are you getting rid of the old one? And are you going to try to overlap resources or not? And as you had already brought up, electrical is a major thing that's got to be thought out in advance if you intend to fire up and test the new transmitter before you decommission the old one.
Well, in too many cases, there is no aux anymore. And so this becomes a real issue that you may find it cheaper, Jeff, to actually get an N+1, get a kilowatt to put on the air while that crew takes the old one out.
Well, I see Mr. Welton's left. Yeah, you very well may find that better to do an N+1 if you can, or even without the N+1 switching or anything, just have a 1 kilowatt that you could throw on the air in lieu of the main transmitter while you're swapping them out. I see that a lot.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be sitting there off the air for a day, two, maybe longer if you're going to have two crews.
I ran into a pretty interesting thing in New York City, both at Empire and the old World Trade.
Your camera's off.
I know it is. I'm not dressed either. What do you want?
A stick figure.
The
You can leave it off.
with what I'm looking at here, guys, I think I should leave it off. So we had platinum VHF for Channel 7 analog at World Trade. And they were upgrading from a tube type. This was Jimmy Schmidt, WABC chief. It wasn't long ago in the late 90s. And the only available there was 480, and the platinum couldn't handle 480, only handled 220. So we had to put step-up transformers in. And then over on the Empire, we put in the first Cigna DTV for CBS. I think it was channel 51, and had absolutely the opposite. The Empire at the time only had a 4,800 volt riser up to the top floors there, and it needed 480, and the building only gave 220. So at the time, so the big UHFs up there all had to do step downs. But by the way, when the new
you had to build a substation up there. I saw that installation to get the power right for that transmitter.
Yeah, well, just step up or step down, and this was I think a 40 kilowatts worth of platinum, so it's not exactly the largest transmitter in the world up there, but So we got that all squared away. And boy, you talk about unions, and plus we went from a tube type with a very high CFM cooling to a low CFM cooling on the transistors. And
Well, you've just said the U word there, Mark, and that's certainly another piece of consideration. Jeff, do you want to address that a little bit when this is delivered and you have to factor in union costs?
well, New York City.
Yeah, one of the things I talk to my customers about a lot, especially in a space like New York City, or I had one recently out in Phoenix where if you can handle the last mile delivery, your boots on the ground, you can look people in the eye, talk to them about the needs of getting the transmitter into the building and so forth. Whereas we're gonna contract, we use one for freight. It's ONE, it's Ontario, New England is what the name of the company is. But so they're going to coordinate trying to get that into your building from their offices in Ontario, which sometimes works without a problem. Sometimes if you're going up to a mountaintop site or something, it's definitely better if you can talk to somebody. We can have it delivered to a dock and then you guys handle the last mile. That will make it a lot better if there's unions to deal with, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're a right to work state here in Arizona, but and it's been many, many years since I've been at South Mountain. The road and the access to some of those buildings, it's not exactly easy.
I'll have to ask Dave if I can share the video he sent me of taking the old HT25 out. And then he had a heck of a crew taking the HT25 out and putting in a GV40 down the stairs where you look down and you see the drop off and it's nothing but mountain, behind it. I'm glad that he handled the last mile because I don't think that our guys could have contracted that to be done properly.
That was one of the places where I know a helicopter was used out here.
Yes, yes, I know that he was telling me about a couple of the buildings out there where they had to deliver via helicopter, which is kind of crazy. And back when I was at Broadcast Electronics, I know we had to deliver some old 35 tube types up to like Mount Willy Willy Nui in Honolulu. So that's always an interesting thing to do.
Jeff, now one of the things we haven't touched on yet, we did talk about electrical entrance, but one phase or three phase.
It's one of the things I talk to folks about a lot. The good thing is on all of our FMs, it's either or. So, the big thing is we just want to make sure we're not looking at any wild legs if you're on the three phase. And the other thing that we always try to include with our transmitters, if it's not there, or talk about, is the surge protection. Nothing will rankle the guys in the warranty department faster than you saying, "Oh, surge protection, we didn't have a surge on there." It's like, oh, I don't know that they're going to cover it if there's not a surge protector on it. So we definitely need to do that. On the AM stuff though, it's no, besides the 1 kilowatt, the J1000, everything is three phase. So and we asked that up front. The site conditions that I sent out in the chat comes from a document that we send out to everybody, and there's 2 full pages of, not only put down the nominal, if you can measure the voltages and show us your configuration. Is it a Y? Is it a closed delta? That sort of thing. So,
Or some of them don't even know the difference between a Y or a delta.
well, and that's why we send that out to say, if, Mr. General Manager who's ordering this transmitter, if you don't know that, please get this to your engineer or somebody who does know what these things mean, and get this filled out properly. So that's one of the ways we can also double check to be sure which surge protection goes with the transmitter as well. So when stuff gets on site, things go smoothly.
Yep. Well, in that case I mentioned earlier, if I hadn't happened to walk into the GM's office at that moment,
Oh, yeah.
that transmitter would have been delivered and I would never have known it was coming.
Well, one of the, and to back up a little bit, and some folks may not know this or may. So I started my career on the broadcast manufacturing side at Broadcast Electronics, and I was there for 23 years doing audio vault stuff. Prior to that, 10 years on the air and whatnot. Anyhow, when I joined Broadcast Electronics, I joined as the integration coordinator for Audio Vault. And my job literally was to, okay, they gave me a folder. Here's a brand new Audio Vault order. And what I would have to do was call up the station, whether it's the general manager or the engineer, and say, okay, the sales guys got your order. Now, what do you really want? And I would have to spend 4 or 5 days going through with them. Okay, they've got these many studios and these cards go here, and this is the formats that they do. And just finding out to make sure that we knew that what the sales order really was. And so that's kind of helped me along my path now, some 28 or 32 years later with Nautel, being able to make sure that I answer a lot of those questions before I ever get the sales order to Jen and our gals at Nautel to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. So,
what other problems have you seen in delivering a transmitter, or have you ever actually canceled an order?
No, I have not seen orders canceled. I wish there's been a couple times where the end user during a delivery had called and said, I don't think the delivery crew is up to the task. We had one, they were delivering a GV40, which is our largest FM, non-combined FM. And it was obvious that the delivery crew couldn't handle it properly. They ended up damaging the transmitter. And rather than call us beforehand and say, hey, these guys aren't adequate to do this, can you get some more people up here to do something? They damaged the transmitter. And it wasn't damaged really bad, but and nonetheless, it bent up some of the sheet metal on the sides and the bottom of the transmitter, which on our GVs are connected, riveted from the inside. So we can't just send out a new side panel. To get this transmitter fixed, it would have either had to go back to Halifax or Bangor and be retrofitted and send it all the way back. The customer ended up keeping the transmitter kind of as a scratch and dent, and we took care of them on the back end with some extra warranty and whatnot. But yeah, it happens. I've been at a couple deliveries where, unfortunately, like I said, the folks in Ontario, they contract with a local delivery agent. The delivery agent says, yes, so we can do that. We're going to send out 4 people, and they on a lift gate, and the truck shows up, and there's 2 people, really scrawny guys that, I don't know, definitely shouldn't be moving a transmitter. And there was no lift gate on the truck. It's like, how are we going to get the transmitter off the back of this truck, down into this building over here, which you can't back up right up to? And luckily, the local engineer knew somebody that was able to bring a forklift out and get it and help them and get it set in place. But that's a rare thing. So we would prefer to make sure that doesn't happen and get that taken care of. Again, with our questionnaire and I think that the one for freight has gotten better when they have a end agent deliverer that has a problem. They'll be blacklisted if they can't do that again. So,
And whether it's a one day or a future install, the engineer should be there to accept the product.
Oh, most definitely. I prefer it to have the engineer there versus just a general manager or somebody, just because not to denigrate GMs or ownership. It seems like the engineering community, we have a little bit better head on our shoulders for stuff like, boy, that sure doesn't look like it's going to fit, or no, you can't drive over there type stuff with assessing the situation. So,
well,
I'll add a note here just for everybody's reference if they don't know this. If you take a delivery and a crate has a hole in it or a box has a hole in it, but even though you think everything's okay, please note that on your bill of lading when you sign off on it, because if there is damage inside, if you don't note it, then it's much more difficult to get credit from the freight company.
Good point.
More
And-
like impossible in my experience. Anyway, regardless of whether you note it or not. We had a giant UPS delivered to a new studio operation in Portland. And the delivery mechanism is really odd. The truck goes down a ramp onto a turntable. The truck is turned around on the turntable to mate up with the loading dock, and everything is brought in that way. Never seen anything like it anywhere else. And somehow in the shipping, this UPS got damaged before it got to the building. And apparently the people who were responsible were more concerned with getting the thing in the building and getting it upstairs. And when they finally got it upstairs, they realized that half the side was crushed. And by that time, the trucker had gone, and that was the end of it. Fortunately, they were able to work some magic with APC and get it fixed, but it delayed the project by about 2 weeks, actually.
Yeah, that's why you examine it when it comes off the truck before it gets in the building.
And preferably even while it's still on the truck,
Yeah.
because then you can say, take it back, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And then it's the trucker's, and that absolutely it's the trucker's fault.
No,
Well-
there's something to say that's not printable. You have GVs, NVLT, VS, VX. How does a customer choose between the models?
Well, so our GV line is our HD flagship, and so that's typically one of the first things that I'll do and Jeff will do is if we're delineate, are we looking at analog or are you looking at HD? Yes, we're looking at HD. We're going to talk GV. If you're on the fence, depending on your budget, and you say, I want to keep the door open for HD, we may talk NVLT because that's upgradable in the field to HD. Or if you're analog only, we're and a higher power, we're looking at NVLT or VX, if you will, because the VX, the small rack mountable stuff, is not HD ready. So really, from our perspective, it really depends on whether you want to do high definition or not.
All right, that's one more factor to pull into this. The HD transmissions. I remember the days when you had to have two transmitters, one burning into a dummy load in order to provide the HD.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at that point, one of the things Jeff didn't mention that is a tool that I use constantly. I actually, right before this started, to clear up some memory, I closed all the tabs, but I normally have a half a dozen tabs of the FCC info site open. So somebody says, oh, I need a 20 kilowatt transmitter. I'll say, well, what's your call letters? And we'll look it up and say, oh, well, why do you need a 20 kilowatt? Well, that's what as Jeff said, that's what my license is for. Well, I see you're only pushing 6.5 kilowatts to the transmitter. Are you sure you'd like a 20 kilowatt? And so forth. Because a lot of times they will actually have the TPO out on FCC info, the Cavell and Merch site. So,
And the part that you haven't said, a lot of this power selection, the power costs in a particular area. You're going to want to have a lower power in Hawaii than in Dallas?
I ran some cost of operations calculations for the Big Island just last week, and he said they're paying 49 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's a little different than doing one for Kansas that's paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So
that it definitely is. Does anyone have a question for Jeff or a comment on what we've discussed so far? Maybe you have a question about why you might get a particular transmitter. Now, we can talk Nautel, yes, but there's others out there. And as Jeff often says, both Jeffs, that, there's a big piece of pizza for everybody. No questions?
That's the way we like it.
Yeah, well, you guys have been covering the topic pretty well.
Yeah.
Any other factors that come to your mind that we haven't discussed yet?
No, like I said, one of the biggest things is we just like to get as much information up front as we can to make sure that we can quote the best solution for your needs. So if we're asking questions, it's just for that reason, that we want to make sure that we're not coming back in 6 months going, "What the heck did you sell me?" And I thought you understood that I needed this. It's like, well, I guess we didn't ask enough questions if we didn't get it right in the first place. So
So we keep coming up with questions. Air
Yeah.
filters.
Yeah.
You supply a transmitter. Shall we go down to Home Depot to replace the air filters?
Well, for ours, unfortunately, they're not stock Home Depot filters. Although if you contact me or Jeff, we can give you um, a list where you can go to Granger, or there's a couple of sites to buy our filters that you don't have to necessarily get them directly from us. But they are odd sized. So
The reason I bring that up is that, yeah, we have remote control AUI. We can take a look at the power and the reflected modulation, things like that. But there's a lot more inside a transmitter that needs to be checked and maintained on a regular basis.
Memory, batteries.
Memory, batteries, yes, airflow.
Well, one of the things that's nice about the AUI and all of the data that we can pull from it now is to see, you can see the RPMs on the fans and say that, oh, I've got this. I can see all the fans on my PAs, and this one here is running either slower or this one's constantly running high, where all the rest of them are running over here. Might be time to pull that module out and replace the fans on it. That sort of thing. Preventative maintenance is always a very good thing. So
And so getting to know the product before it's delivered will give you a good idea of the protocols you need to put into place for continued operation.
yeah, indeed. And one of the things I'll do as well, and Jeff does too, is send out our manuals. We've got the pre-install, install, operations manual, troubleshooting, and there's a plethora of great information in all of them specific to the model of transmitter that you have. Um,
And
and
generation and serial number.
and that is correct. That is correct. We definitely want to make sure we know what your serial number is to make sure we get you the correct information. So
It can get a little dicey if you don't know, or if you're suddenly called in to help somebody and you're looking at a VS transmitter and you don't know if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, what, 7, 8, what generation are you up to now?
that's a good question. Welton, what do you think? What are we on VS now?
uh, 2 primary hardware platforms, 2 bootloaders, 4 controllers, probably about version 10.
10 softwares.
Yeah, at least. So yeah, it's definitely, and like with the older boxes especially, I mean, there were 3 or 4 hardware vintages of the MFET 50. There were 3 major hardware iterations of the ND10. So it absolutely, the more we know, the better we can help.
Very good.
I got to dust out because I do have somebody dropping something off, but thanks very much for putting up with me for what little bit I was here.
Well, thanks for being with us. We'll look forward to what you come up with for next month.